My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 43 years old. I never thought I would be the kind of person to share an experience like this. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the youngest of 4 kids, and I always felt invisible in the shadow of my siblings. Life wasn't easy, but it wasn't terrible either. What I didn't know was that my life would take a turn that I could never have imagined, a turn that would bring me face to face with Jesus himself and open my eyes to the unseen spiritual battles happening all around us. What I experienced when I died changed my life forever. It happened on August 28, 2022. I remember it clearly because it felt like any other day. I had been battling health issues for years, heart palpitations, constant fatigue, and a general sense that something just wasn't right with my body. That morning, I felt worse than usual. My chest was tight, and I was struggling to catch my breath. My husband, David, insisted that I go to the hospital, but I waved him off, telling him it was probably just stress. I was trying to convince myself more than him. I had always been the kind of person who put others before myself, my kids, my husband, even my coworkers. But that day, I didn't realize that my body was screaming for help. By the time I agreed to go, it was too late. I collapsed on the living room floor, clutching my chest. I heard David yelling, saw him fumbling with his phone to call 911, and then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my living room anymore. At first, I couldn't comprehend where I was. The room I had been in just moments ago, the cozy space where I had spent so many hours of my life, was now distant and foreign. It was as if I was suspended in an entirely different dimension, yet everything felt intensely familiar. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of the situation. What had happened? I had been going about my day, just another ordinary afternoon, when suddenly, nothing. There was no pain, no weight, no heaviness of the body that I had grown so accustomed to in my lifetime. I should have been scared, or at least panicked, but instead, I was filled with a strange sense of calm. It was as if all the burdens I had carried through life, the worries, the heartaches, the regrets, had been lifted in an instant. I felt free in a way I had never known before. Looking down, I saw my physical body lying lifeless on the floor of the living room. It was as if I was observing myself from a distance, removed from the reality of that existence. Paramedics were working frantically over me, trying to revive my body, but their efforts seemed distant and unimportant. David, my husband, was kneeling in the corner, his face buried in his hands. The sound of his sobs reached my consciousness, but it didn't touch me the way it should have. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him that everything was going to be okay, but I couldn't. I was no longer tied to that world. The absence of fear was both surprising and comforting. It was as if I intuitively knew that everything happening around me was part of a greater plan. There was a sense of inevitability in the air, an understanding that the moments unfolding were meant to be. I didn't need to fear the unknown, because I was in the process of discovering something far beyond my earthly comprehension. Then, without warning, I felt a force, gentle yet firm, begin to pull me upward. It wasn't a violent motion, but a steady, purposeful ascent. It was as though some unseen hand was guiding me towards something greater, something far beyond my understanding. The sensation wasn't one of fear or chaos, but of being led with purpose and care. I had no control over the direction I was moving, but I didn't resist. I didn't want to resist. The surroundings around me began to change. What had been my living room faded, and in its place, I found myself surrounded by a light so pure, so brilliant, that it took my breath away. It was unlike any light I had ever seen, gentle, warm, and filled with a sense of love that seemed to radiate from every corner. It wasn't blinding, like the sun, but soft and enveloping, filling me with peace and serenity. I felt loved in a way I had never experienced before, as though I was wrapped in the embrace of something infinite and eternal. I realized in that moment that this light wasn't just light. It was a presence so profound that it left me breathless and overwhelmed with the sense that I was standing before something, or someone, far beyond my comprehension. And then I saw him. There are no words that can adequately describe what it felt like to stand in the presence of Jesus. His appearance was beyond anything I could have imagined, and yet in some deep part of me, I knew it was him. The love radiating from him was so vast, so consuming, that I felt as though I had known him forever, even though I had never met him in my earthly life. His eyes were the most incredible part of his presence. They weren't just eyes, they were windows to eternity. They were filled with wisdom, compassion, and understanding, and when he looked at me, I felt as though he could see every part of my soul. It was as though I was standing before the very source of truth and love itself. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle yet powerful, like the sound of a river flowing through a quiet forest, peaceful and unhurried. He spoke my name, Emily, and when he did, I felt a warmth flood through me, as if his very words were embracing me with love and comfort. "You're not here by accident," he said. "There is something you must see, something you must understand." I wanted to fall to my knees, overwhelmed by his presence, but I realized I no longer had a physical body to do so. I was no longer bound by the limitations of flesh and bone. Instead, I was spirit, pure and unencumbered. Yet, I felt more alive than I ever had in my earthly life, as if my soul was finally waking up to the reality of existence. Without a word, he reached out his hand to me. There was no hesitation on my part as I took it. The moment our hands met, an overwhelming surge of love filled every inch of my being. It was the purest, most unconditional love I could ever imagine, and it flooded through me, healing wounds I hadn't even known I carried. I was filled with peace, joy, and understanding. "Come," he said, and with that simple invitation, we began to move. Jesus led me through the light, and as we moved, the surroundings began to shift again. I was no longer standing in the presence of pure light, but now I was looking at something infinitely more beautiful, a vision of heaven itself. Even now, the words seem inadequate to describe it. It was a place of such beauty and harmony that my soul recognized it as home. The colors around me were unlike anything I had ever seen. They were vibrant, yet soft, beyond anything that could be described in earthly terms. The air itself seemed to hum with an energy that resonated deep within me, a harmony that matched the very core of my being. It was as if the whole of creation was singing in perfect unity. And there was music. The music of heaven. It wasn't just sound, but a resonance, a vibration of pure joy that filled the very air. The melodies were unlike anything I had ever heard, and yet they felt familiar, as if I had always known them in the depths of my soul. I saw angels, countless angels, more than I could ever count, moving with grace and purpose. They were so beautiful, their radiance shining with a brightness that wasn't blinding but rather gentle, illuminating the entire realm. Some were singing praises to God, their voices harmonizing in a way that seemed to weave the very fabric of existence together. It was a sound that transcended words, a sound that spoke directly to the heart of creation itself. Others were working, tending to what appeared to be strands of light. Jesus explained that these strands were the spiritual connections between heaven and earth, the threads that tied humanity to God. The angels were not merely praising or worshipping, they were also actively involved in protecting and guiding the spiritual connections of each individual on earth. They were guardians, watching over the souls of mankind, and they did so with great love and care. I found myself deeply moved by the beauty and the profound purpose of these beings. They were not distant or indifferent, they were deeply invested in the lives of every person. Each soul on earth was valuable, each step of spiritual growth celebrated. The angels' joy was contagious, and I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of peace and love as I witnessed their work. Then, as if shifting my focus, Jesus led me to another vision. The light around me dimmed, and the atmosphere grew heavy, oppressive. A sense of foreboding hung in the air, and I could feel the weight of something dark and tragic. The beauty of heaven seemed far away, replaced by a realm that was consumed by shadows. "This," Jesus said softly, "is the result of pride." Before me appeared a figure, Lucifer, once the most beautiful and powerful of all the angels. He stood, not in glory, but in darkness. His form was twisted and contorted, his beauty marred by the consequences of his own rebellion. I could see the pride in his eyes, a pride that had consumed him, turning him against God. Jesus explained the fall of Lucifer in a way I had never understood before. It wasn't a sudden, violent rebellion. No, it had been a slow, insidious process. Lucifer had been filled with pride, and from that pride, he began to question everything he had been given. He wanted more. He wanted to be equal to God. He wanted the throne for himself. In his heart, Lucifer began to sow seeds of doubt and dissatisfaction among the angels. He whispered lies to them, promising power and glory if they would follow him. Many, once loyal and faithful, fell for the lies and joined his rebellion. I saw them, angels who had once been filled with light and love, turning away, following Lucifer into darkness. The moment of his fall was catastrophic. I watched as Lucifer and his followers were cast out of heaven, their light extinguished, their beauty turned to darkness. They became the demons, beings of deception, whose only purpose was to lead others away from the light and into the shadows. It was a tragic sight, one that filled me with sorrow and a deep understanding of the destructive power of pride. I saw in an instant the immense cost of Lucifer's rebellion, not only to him but to all of creation. The angels who had remained loyal to God, the ones who had chosen humility and love, had been right all along. Their reward was the beauty of heaven, a place of peace, purpose, and love. But Lucifer, in his pride, had chosen a path of destruction. And now, he and his followers would wander the darkness for eternity. The questions that had swirled in my mind, unanswered for so long, now flooded out of me. I was eager to understand, to make sense of the cosmos, of life, and the eternal struggle between light and dark. I had just witnessed something beyond my comprehension, something more profound than words could capture. The events I had seen in heaven, the beauty, the music, the peace, had left me with a longing to understand the full picture. As I stood in the presence of Jesus, surrounded by the divine light, I couldn't help but ask, what about the rest of creation? How did Lucifer's fall affect it? The vision that followed was deeply moving. Jesus allowed me to see the earth before sin entered the world. It was a place of perfection, unspoiled, pure, and brimming with life. I saw vibrant green landscapes, crystal clear waters, and skies so blue they seemed to stretch on forever. The harmony of creation was palpable. But as the vision shifted, I saw something else, a shadow creeping across the land. It wasn't a literal shadow, but a wave of darkness that seemed to seep into every corner of the world. It was as if the very fabric of creation itself was being corrupted, touched by the stain of sin. I saw pain, suffering, disease, and death. It was as though the world was crying out, groaning under the weight of the rebellion that had first begun in heaven. "This is why your world experiences pain and brokenness," Jesus said. Lucifer's rebellion sent ripples through all of creation. But even in this, there is hope. Acts of love and obedience to God push back the darkness, bringing light and restoration. I could feel the weight of what he was saying. The world, the beautiful world I had once known, had become tainted, not by the hand of God, but by the choices made by Lucifer and those who followed him. Yet, even in the midst of this darkness, there was a glimmer of light, a chance for redemption, a way to restore what had been lost. It was a message of hope that I had not fully understood until now, and it filled me with both awe and a deep sense of responsibility. My mind, already brimming with questions, was relentless. There were still so many things I didn't understand, so many aspects of God's plan that seemed mysterious and beyond comprehension. Why, I asked, did God allow Lucifer to rebel in the first place? Couldn't he have prevented it? Jesus looked at me with infinite patience. "Love requires free will," he said. "Without the ability to choose, there can be no true love, no true worship, no true relationship." The answer seemed so simple, yet it resonated with such profound truth that it felt as though a veil had been lifted from my eyes. Jesus went on to explain that God's ultimate plan was never to create automatons, beings who obeyed out of necessity, but to create beings who could choose love freely, who could choose to worship and walk in relationship with him out of a deep and genuine love. He continued, "Without the ability to choose, there can be no true love. Love cannot be forced, it must be freely given. This is why I came to earth. To show you what real love looks like, to give you the opportunity to choose that love." I thought about this for a long time. It made sense, in a way, but it also raised new questions. How could something so precious, love, come with such a price? God had known, even before he created the world, that there would be suffering. He had known that Lucifer would rebel, that sin would enter the world, and that his son would have to suffer and die for the sins of humanity. And yet, he chose to create. He chose love. It was overwhelming to think about the depths of God's sacrifice and the beauty of his eternal plan. "Our Father knew the cost," Jesus said, almost as if reading my thoughts. He knew it would bring pain and suffering, even the sacrifice of his own son. But he also knew that the love that would arise from free choice would be worth it. It was a truth I had never fully understood until that moment. Love, true love, was worth the cost, no matter the price. Then Jesus showed me more of the afterlife, more of the realms that exist beyond death. I had already seen the splendor of heaven, but now I was about to witness other realms, each with its own unique atmosphere and purpose. The first realm he showed me was one of pure peace, a place where souls who had lived in love and humility resided. These souls radiated joy and serenity. They were surrounded by angels who tended to them, guiding them in their ongoing growth and understanding of God's love. I saw a vision of people, ordinary people, not saints or extraordinary figures, but souls who had chosen love, even in the face of hardship. Some of them I recognized from my earthly life, people who had always been kind and selfless, even when no one was watching. They seemed to be glowing with a peace that was impossible to describe. "These are the righteous," Jesus said. "They chose to walk the path of love and repentance during their earthly lives. Their faithfulness has brought them here." The second realm we visited was different. It was not as bright as the first, but there was a certain heaviness to it. This was a place of learning, where souls who had sought truth but hadn't fully found it during their earthly lives were given a chance to grow. Some of the souls in this realm seemed to be engaged in deep contemplation, their faces serious but not sorrowful. Others were being mentored by beings of light, angels or perhaps other souls who had already reached a higher understanding. There was no judgment here, only mercy and opportunity. This was a realm of growth and redemption. "These are the learning souls," Jesus explained. "They are here because they sought truth but did not fully find it during their lives. This is a place of mercy and growth, where they are given the chance to see their lives in the light of truth and choose redemption." The final realm we visited was the most difficult for me to witness. It was a place that was dark, cold, and filled with sorrow. I saw souls wandering aimlessly, their faces etched with regret. Some seemed to be trapped in endless cycles of their own making, reliving their mistakes over and over again. Others were clinging to their pride, refusing to acknowledge the love and grace that was being offered to them. It was a place of hopelessness, but not one without a glimmer of light. Even here, there was still a chance for redemption, though it seemed as though the souls in this realm had closed themselves off from it. "These are the lost souls," Jesus said. "They have rejected love and truth, choosing instead to cling to their pride, anger, or hatred. Yet even here, hope remains. My light reaches even the darkest places, and I never stop calling out to them." I could feel the depth of Jesus' compassion for them. He did not condemn them. Instead, his heart ached for them. It was a humbling and sobering experience, one that left me with a deep sense of both sadness and hope. There was always hope, even in the darkest places. After showing me the realms of the afterlife, Jesus turned to me with a serious expression. "There is something you must understand about Lucifer," he said. He showed me a vision of Lucifer, an angel of light, once beautiful and powerful, now a being consumed by his own rebellion. But then, Jesus did something that took my breath away. He showed me a flicker of light within Lucifer, a tiny spark of the goodness and beauty that had once been his. Even in the midst of his hatred and rebellion, there was still a part of Lucifer that had not been completely consumed by darkness. "Lucifer has not repented," Jesus said, "but the possibility of redemption remains. That is the depth of God's love. It is a love so vast, so incomprehensible, that it extends even to the one who rebelled most deeply." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Could it be true? Could even Lucifer be offered a chance at redemption? The thought was both overwhelming and perplexing. Yet, Jesus confirmed it. It is not about whether he will choose it, but that the door remains open. In that moment, I understood something fundamental about God's love. It was not a love that was limited by human standards. It was a love that reached beyond all bounds, extending even to those who had chosen the darkest paths. Then Jesus turned to me and said, "Emily, you have been shown these things for a reason. When you return, you must share what you have seen. The world is in a battle between light and darkness, but the power of love and truth will always prevail." I felt a sudden pull, as if I were being drawn back to my earthly body. Panic rose in me. I didn't want to leave. "But I want to stay with you," I cried. Jesus smiled gently. "Your time here is not yet finished. There is still work for you to do. Trust in me, and I will guide you. At that moment, I knew that my journey was far from over. The things I had seen and the truths I had learned would change everything for me. And though I did not yet fully understand the purpose of it all, I knew one thing for certain: love and redemption were the greatest powers in the universe, and they would always prevail. The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air. My chest ached, and I could hear the frantic beeping of machines. I was in the hospital, surrounded by doctors and nurses. David was by my side, tears streaming down his face. "You're back," he whispered, clutching my hand. "Thank God you're back." I wanted to tell him everything I had seen, but the words wouldn't come. It was too overwhelming, too sacred. It took days, weeks even, for me to process everything. But as I recovered, I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't keep this to myself. Since that day, my life has never been the same. I've shared my story with anyone who will listen, not to draw attention to myself, but to point people to the truth I experienced. What I learned is this: we are all part of a much greater story, one of love, redemption, and spiritual growth. Every choice we make matters, every act of kindness, every moment of humility, every step toward love and truth pushes back the darkness. Lucifer's rebellion may have brought pain and suffering into the world, but it is not the final word. God's love is more powerful than any force of darkness, and it is available to all who seek it. I still don't have all the answers. I don't know why I was given the chance to experience what I did, but I am forever grateful. What I do know is that Jesus is real, His love is infinite, and we are never alone. If you're watching this, I want you to know that no matter where you are in life, no matter what mistakes you've made, you are loved beyond measure. And if I could come back from death to share just one message, it would be this: choose love, choose truth, and never stop seeking the light.